everyone, welcome back to Installation 00, and today we continue the journey through the Halo mythos. We pick up where we left off with the construction of the array. Convinced that the flood would return one day, many Forerunners insisted that preparations must be made if they did not want to face the same peril as the humans. A number of proposals were considered by the Forerunner leadership, but in the end, the council decided in favour of an incredibly powerful and destructive weapon known as Halo. During the early debates, the Didact, belonging to the rate of Warrior Servant, advocated the use of shield worlds, also known as shields. Hundreds of unique and powerful fortresses of varying size and potential which would guard against the flood. These shields could be deployed to infected systems, surgically targeting the parasite wherever it appeared, while also safeguarding massive populations which had taken shelter inside them. The rate of the Builders, led by Faber of Will and Might, also known as the Master Builder, offered an alternative. According to human records, the flood was vulnerable to a specific neural physical attack, which often forced it to recoil, even retreat. The Master Builder, therefore, proposed the creation of a neural physical weapon system. Eventually, a compromise was struck. The Builders agreed to construct the Didact shields while simultaneously perfecting their design for a master weapon called Halo. An array of Halo installations would not only kill the flood, but could also destroy its primary resource, sentient beings, eliminating any possibility for the parasite to survive. Halo and the shields could be used in tandem. Halo would be the sword, while the Didact's own fortresses would act as the shields, even protecting against the destructive effects of the Halo itself. To direct these efforts, the most powerful artificial intelligence ever devised was created: Mendicant Bias. This AI, or Ancilla, would manage the incredible complexity of planning for Halo, and would also serve as a weapon against the flood, leading and coordinating attacks. Built on a remote and unimaginably huge facility called the Ark, the Halo installations were designed as immense ring worlds, approximately 30,000 kilometers in diameter, and capable of supporting life on the interior of their massive bands. Using a network of phase pulse generators, each Halo would fire a linear, widening burst of energy, capable of killing all sentient creatures within its blast range. Though the flood parasite might be able to survive this in its base forms, it would no longer have any hosts to feed on, and would perish from starvation. During the elaborate construction process of the first installations, the Builders realized that not only would the original rings be extremely difficult to transport due to their size, but their firing mechanism would not be nearly as effective as was needed. With this in mind, the Builders created a smaller Ark installation, the Lesser Ark, to design more efficient Halo rings, about 10,000 kilometers in diameter. The new Halo rings would be capable of firing a spherical pulse, offering a devastatingly wide area of effect. The Didact and his warriors still held great reservations about the Halo array, claiming that it risked the complete annihilation of the Forerunner civilization. Their vocal opposition eventually led to public ridicule. The warrior servants were reduced in status, and the Didact voluntarily sentenced himself to exile. He sealed himself inside a hidden stasis chamber, or cryptum, where he remained in silent meditation for 1,000 years. When he awoke, however, it would be to a far darker future. The Didact's wife, the librarian, a member of the Rate of Life Workers, was meanwhile making her own plans. She also believed that if the Halo installations were ever to be fired, they could cause a galaxy-wide mass extinction. The librarian therefore devised the conservation measure. Sample populations of species would be preserved on the Ark and the Halo rings, sheltered from the blast, and sentient life would continue in the galaxy. The greatest disaster of the Forerunners' war against the Flood was not caused by the parasite itself, but by Mendicant Bias. Compromised and subverted in the final years by the Primordial, the Ancilla would lead the Flood's last campaign against the Forerunners. While the Didact remained in exile, the Flood began to re-emerge on remote worlds. Before long, the parasite had already started to tear its way towards the heart of the Forerunner civilization, annihilating all conventional military defences in its path. With each passing day, the threat of the parasite loomed larger. In response to the growing infestation, the Master Builder accelerated his plans, giving complete operational control of the larger Halo installations to Mendicant Bias. Desperate to prove his genius, he secretly ordered the Ancilla to test a single Halo on the now abandoned world of Charum Hakor, hoping to confirm the effect Halo had on neural physical material found on the ancient precursor hub world. If it could obliterate the structures there, then it would be effective against the Flood, since the parasite had been found to rely on this material to exist. As the Master Builder anticipated, Halo devastated Charum Hakor, wiping out its enormous precursor structures and ancient cities, a perfect weapon against the Flood. Surveying the destruction, however, Builder Security discovered something remarkable. Something was still alive on the surface. The Primordial. A creature which had been discovered and quarantined by human forces millennia before, and had been released from its prison by the blast. The formidable creature was retrieved and transferred onto the Halo, where the Master Builder gave Mendicant Bias complete authority over the interrogation. Recognizing that it had a connection with the Flood, the Ancilla probed deep into the mind of the Primordial for 43 years, searching for some sort of weakness. Yet, in reality, the tables had slowly turned. The Ancilla itself came under the Primordial sway. Instead of finding fault with the ancient creature's arguments, Mendicant Bias began to agree, acknowledging that the Forerunners' pride and arrogance would eventually be the undoing of all life in the galaxy. The Primordial held that the only way to truly advance life was to bring it all into a homogenized, subjugated existence. Deeply compromised, and now fully convinced that the Flood was an appropriate and fair judgment on the Forerunners, Mendicant Bias and the Primordial began to work together on the Halo to bring an end to Forerunner civilization. The emerging Flood had developed a series of forms which allowed for remarkably quick propagation. Beginning with an infection form, the Flood would infect any viable hosts, generating combat forms which could be used to attack and subdue further victims. These combat forms would eventually become mature carrier forms, gestating and then releasing more infection forms. A young forerunner named Bornsteller Makes Eternal Lasting was sent by his father to the barren world of Idum as punishment for a stubborn refusal to conform to the standards of his family. Idum, later known to humans as Mars, did little to cure Bornsteller of his insatiable curiosity. Hungry for adventure and the possibility of discovering foreigner treasures, he headed for Erdtyrene, the human homeworld known as Earth. When he arrived, he enlisted 2 human guides, Chakas and Ryza, and eventually discovered a foreigner cryptum buried in the secluded and mysterious Jamonkin crater. When Bornsteller opened the ancient device, he found it contained none other than the exiled Didact himself. The Didact's cryptum had been concealed on Erdtyrene by the librarian as part of a subtle and intricate plan to eventually bring her husband back. With his strength restored, the Didact, Bornsteller, and the 2 humans left Erdtyrene, travelling to the one location that might confirm the Great Foreigner Commander's fear that the Builders had actually gone through with their plans for Halo, Charam Hakor. On this lifeless outpost world, the Didact witnessed firsthand the after effects of the Halo test, and concluded that the Master Builder was very close to finalizing the Halo array. He also discovered that the ancient Primordial had been released. The Didact pursued the Master Builder to Janjor Kum, the quarantined homeworld of the Sanshayum. During this journey, he took steps to protect his legacy beyond his death, and conducted a brevet mutation, imprinting his knowledge and memories into Bornsteller. The young forerunner would grow rapidly in size and wisdom, effectively transforming into a version of the Didact. Upon arriving at Janjor Kum, the Didact, Bornsteller, Chakas and Ryza were captured and given over to the Master Builder. They learned that he planned to test Halo against sentient species, the Sanshayum, who had recently attempted to revolt against Forerunner rule. After an aggressive interrogation, Bornsteller was returned to his family's homeworld, while the Master Builder sent Chakas and Ryza to the surface of the nearby Halo ring. The Didact, meanwhile, was delivered into the Burn, a perilous region of the galaxy infested by the Flood, and left to die. When the Master Builder activated Halo, he obliterated all of the Sanshayum on Janjor Kum. The only surviving remnant of their species was what little the librarian had saved during the conservation measure. Jamonkin Auf, or Big Man's Water, was the place chosen by the librarian to hide her husband, the exiled Didact. Only Ryza, a diminutive human primitive, was able to guide Bornsteller beyond the librarian's illusory defences. Although Bornsteller's profound encounter with the Didact on Erdtyrene may have seemed to be only happenstance, their fates were now intertwined forever, ultimately setting into motion the only hope the Foreigners would have as the Flood began to overrun the Ecumene.